Here Milan Dojcinovski from the DBpedia Association, which is hosted by the Leipzig University at INFI. And I would like to ask if you can hear me well first.
I can. And can you hear me?
Yeah, perfect.
Excellent.
Good. So I'm very happy to organize this tutorial, which is basically the second tutorial that we organize. In July, we organized the first DBpedia stack tutorial, which was very successful with over 100 registrations. And we decided to organize another one after the holidays period. So here we are. The main focus of the tutorial is to make people familiar with the latest advancements around the DBpedia technology stack. And there are three topics here. The first one is the DBpedia databus technology, which allows you to publish data on the DBpedia technology stack and use this data in your applications. The second topic is around the databus collections, which enables more efficient and easier access and work with the DBpedia datasets published on the databus. And the last topic is around developing and deploying databus-driven Docker applications. So in general, we would like to teach people with this tutorial and teach them how to replicate the DBpedia infrastructure. So it will be me guiding this tutorial, and the technology itself will be presented by my colleague Jan Forberg. Hi, Jan.
Hello.
Yeah, and this is the schedule. So basically, we have the three sessions. The first session is dedicated to the databus platform. The second one is around the databus collections. And the third one is around Dockerized DBpedia applications. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask. After each session, we will dedicate some time for questions. The most efficient way to ask questions would be to paste your question in the Slack DBpedia channel. If you are not there, please join. Also, please mute yourself for a better call hygiene. And turn off the video, because I think quite some people will join, so that we save some bandwidth. In case you need to go offline, don't worry, the tutorial will be recorded and we will share the video with you after the tutorial finish. So with this, I would give the word to my colleague Jan to present the first technology, which is the database platform.
Thank you, Milan. I'll share my screen. Is that working?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Excellent. All right. So yeah, welcome from my side as well. I will first give a short introduction to the databus platform. First of all, a few words about the DBpedia technology stack. So the DBpedia technology stack consists of the databus collections, and also a range of applications and services that you can run using Docker, and that allows you to replicate the DBpedia infrastructure, and that makes it also quite easy to extend this infrastructure or build your own applications on top of the stack. Here's an overview over the rough information or data flow in the DBpedia infrastructure, the databus infrastructure, sorry. And on the very right, you can see some different data storages or different servers holding data. And when we say uploading data to the databus, that doesn't mean that you actually upload data to the databus server, but you create metadata for your own hosted data that is then loaded to the databus. So the actual file hosting is decentralized on our machines or your own machines, and only the metadata describing the data, how big it is, so the language, the compression or the format, all that is saved to the databus. And therefore, the databus itself is a catalog of RDF metadata that is aggregated for all the files that are on some other servers. And since it's an RDF store or a triple store, you can then go ahead and query with SPARQL on that catalog and make really sophisticated selections of files that you want to use in your applications. And that brings us to the databus collections on the left side. The databus collections are basically SPARQL queries. So when you save a DBpedia databus collection on the databus, you can do that when you log into the databus, you can create collections. When you do that, you specify a label and also some documentation for your collection, and also your collection will get a unique identifier that is accessible over HTTP. But you also specify, most importantly, a SPARQL query that is associated with your collection and that makes a collection on downloadable files on the databus. The databus then resolves that query to files and you can then download the files from any other server where the files are located. When you want to use your the data sets or any files in your apps and services, you can, of course, use whatever language you're using and query the databus directly and get the file download URLs, or you use Bash script and use curl or whatever, or you can use one of the download and conversion modules that we have already developed and that are quite easy to use. In my examples that I'm going to show you later, I'm using a really minimal download client, which only gets past a collection URI and then pulls files to your local system. But there's also the DBpedia download client, which is also able to do file conversion. So for example, different RDF formats, or I think even if you provide mappings, it can do RDF to or Turtle to CSV, for example. So your apps and services can work on various data sets and receive those data sets in specific formats and specific compressions, or even other facets like languages and so on. This is how the data on the databus is structured, and Maven is one of the main, it does it a lot like a Maven or Maven Central, where software is structured in a certain way. And the most important entity is the artifact. That's why I made it so big. And the artifact is a logical data entity. So an artifact might be associated with multiple files, but one file that is associated with an artifact always describes a certain logical thing. So for example, the mapping-based objects from DBpedia, they have different versions, different files, different languages, different compressions, but they are all associated with that artifact. So when you want to describe a logical data entity, you can do that by specifying it as an artifact. Multiple artifacts can then be put into groups, similar to Maven Central as well. There's groups to bundle together certain artifacts that belong together. All the groups will be then published under your publisher name. And when you go back to the leaf nodes, each artifact can have multiple versions. And all the data that you upload to the databus or the metadata will have a unique databus identifier, and this structure reflects into the URI that your artifact or version is going to have. So you will have the databus dbpedia.org base URL, and then the path will be your publisher name, your group ID, your artifact ID, and your version ID. So this is, for example, is a URI that you can then visit to see the data that is associated with the artifact and version. All right, so let's go ahead and have a look at how you can upload data to the databus, or more precisely, generate metadata and upload that to the databus. There are a few preliminaries. There's a manual available, and the link that is, I mean, we shared the slides, so you can go there over the slides. And this is way more extensive. Feel free to have a look at it if there's any problems with your databus upload. And also, I shared in the chat a link to a GitHub repository where the resources that I'm going to use today are available. You can clone that repository and follow along. The things that are required for the databus upload are the following. You need Maven on your machine with 3.3.9 or higher. You will need a linked web ID and databus account and a PKCS12 certificate. I will come to that in a bit. You will need a data project. Again, this is available in the Stack Tutorial Resources repository. And you will need a server where you can host your data. So the web ID and PKCS12 certificate, there's a tutorial also available on GitHub on how to create it. And you need a databus account. You can go to databus.dbpedia.org and hit the register button on the top right and create your account. And once that's done, you can link your web ID and your databus account. And then the authentication side of the process is all set up. If you don't have a web ID and a certificate already, feel free to follow the tutorial. In a few words, so the PKCS12 certificate can, and bear with me if I'm saying something wrong, and as far as I know, you can use it to make a web request. And in the web ID, you post the public key of the key pair that was used to create the certificate, and also inside of the certificate, signed with that key pair, is your web ID URI. So when you make a web request with that PKCS12 certificate, the server can then validate that the owner of that web ID document that can only be accessed by you made that very request. And since your databus account is linked to your web ID, it makes sure that only you can make publish data under your publisher name, under your databus account name, and no one else. And it is also used to sign the metadata that is being uploaded. So it makes also sure that the metadata that has been uploaded is correct and hasn't been changed by anyone else, and thus points to your data in a correct way. All right. I had a connection error earlier. Am I still connected to you guys?
Yes. Yeah, we can hear you.
Perfect. All right. So I made a couple of changes on my side here to the data project. So I'm going to my console now, and you can see here that I changed the name of the artifact from cities to huge cities, because cities is now obviously already taken. I wanted to show a fresh project, and that I also changed the version to the current date. You can see that on the root of my project is a pom.xml, so a Maven configuration file. Then I have a folder which contains another pom.xml, and then some markdown file and another folder containing actual data. The huge cities TTL is some RDF that I pulled from the DBpedia Sparkly endpoint, containing some data about big cities from across the world. Let's have a look at the root pom.xml. And here you can see some general Maven things. This bit here references the parent POM, the parent databus POM. This turns off software compilation and makes the process run its custom phases. Here we can see the group ID. So the upload I'm going to make will upload for a specific group under my account, which will be Jan on the databus, and the group ID will be stack tutorial. Here is a fallback artifact ID. As you could see earlier in my folder structure, there was a folder for the huge cities, which is the artifact, and that also has a POM XML. And there I will specify the artifact ID, and this is just a fallback in case some artifact doesn't have this specified. Here's the version that I want to use, 2020.9.2. And as a module, well, that is specified is the folder that my artifact is going to be located in. And there's a couple of properties. Most importantly, package directory and download URL path. When the databus upload runs, and it is going to run using Maven, sorry, and it will copy your data to this directory. So it will be copied to data daf and then the group ID, which will be stack tutorial, was it, right? And the artifact ID being huge cities. Then my data. So since this folder is accessible over the internet, I can then specify this path in the download URL path. So once the data is copied into this folder, my data will be accessible here. And there it doesn't matter what you use. You can use WebDAV, for example, to push files from your local machine to a server, and then or you can even take your files and put them into some directory that is accessible manually. The only thing that is important is that the Databus Maven plugin will try to copy the files to the package directory and then checks whether these files are accessible over download URL path. Next is my web ID. I will show you my web ID real quick, which is here. So that's how a web ID looks like. And here are public keys of the certificates I'm using for different devices. There's also my name in here. There's a beautiful picture of myself, and yeah, that's about the web ID document. I have a certificate here on this machine, and this certificate, the public key of this certificate, again, can be found here in my web ID document. I can specify a license for the publishing on the databus, also the license that is associated with the files. And I can write some documentation that is attached to the group of this upload. So it's a general documentation about this upload. All right. Let's go into the huge cities folder and have a look at the POM XML that is located in here. So this is the artifact POM compared to the group POM that we saw earlier. Here I specify the parent POM, which is the group POM, and also specify the group ID and artifact ID, the version that I want to use. If I don't specify a version, or even here, if I don't specify a license, it will take the parameters that have been configured in the group POM. So I don't have to do this here, but just to show you that I can potentially override these settings from the parent POM, I added this here into the artifact POM as well. All right. So what else is in here? The markdown file. Let's have a look at that. Here is just some documentation. This will be the first line as a header will be the label of my artifact. The first actual line of description will be the abstract, and then everything from the second line onwards is the documentation of my artifact, and there I can use Markdown as well, so it doesn't have to be plain text. And last but not least, we have the data. So inside of the 2029.2 folder, I have my huge cities turtle file that is going to be uploaded to the databus. So I'll skip all this. This is basically all just about that what I just discussed. And here is how you run the upload by simply typing maven deploy. This whole setup is takes a while once the first time you do it, and then re-releasing data in new versions and new variants gets increasingly easy, and it can be automated fairly easily using this Maven plugin. So I will run Maven validate first and see if everything is configured correctly. Ask for a password. And as it seems everything is fine, my private key was validated against my web ID. It is associated to my databus account under databus.org/Jan. Here the RDF that is created as a label and comment and description that was pulled from the Markdown file. So moment of truth. Yep, because I'm a bit clumsy, I typed in the wrong password. This time it worked. And now it will generate metadata for this turtle file that I'm uploading and create an entry in the databus database. So this will take a couple of seconds. If that is too slow, I'll already show you where this can be then found under databus.org/Jan. Stack tutorial, and there's the uploads I made earlier. Now it's done, and I should be able to refresh this and see my data set. No, not yet. Also not yet. Here, that's where it should be available. Didn't type anything wrong. Yeah, probably had a typo. Yeah, this is the data that I uploaded. Doesn't have a variant here, but format TTL, no compression. And yeah, that's it. Here I have my description and the group documentation that are specified in the upload. I can access the metadata document, the license, and all that stuff. The databus website, which I'm on right now, is basically a fancy metadata viewer where you can make browse the data that is being uploaded. So this is what you can see. This is basically the same thing in a more raw format. All right, I can click here to download my data. And that's it. That's how you upload your metadata to the databus. I will go to the next topic, the databus collections, but I think we can make answer some questions if there are any.
There has been one question related to the public license, which I already answered, so we can keep the discussion there, but no other questions in the Slack channel.
Okay, then I'll go ahead
I think we can continue, and if there is any question, feel free to write the question in the chat. Yeah.
So I'm going to talk about accessing your data and specifically about databus collections. You can go to the, well, this is still the old resources, but this URI to access to see your data, which we did right now, and also you can go to databus.dbpedia.org/yazgui, or there's also the DBpedia style endpoint there, where you can run queries and select download files, for example, like this, by selecting the download URL of a certain data set that is associated to this artifact. To make this even easier, and to selecting data and aggregating multiple data sets and multiple artifacts into one collection, we have the databus collections. And you can access that by going to the databus and going to the collections editor here. And you will need a databus account there as well. So I'm going to log into my account. And here you can see the collection editor. Up here is a drop-down, so you can see I already have a few collections, but I want to create a new one. So I will create a new draft, and I have to specify a couple of things first before I can publish my collection and make it accessible for everyone. So I have to specify a collection identifier. So I will go with huge city, since my artifact is named like that. Give it a label, and I think right now there's a required amount of characters that you have to type, so I'm doing what you hopefully will not do and create some dummy description. I hit commit, and now my collection is published. I can preview here what the collection contains, and as you can see, it doesn't contain anything, and yeah, there's no licenses associated with this collection, but you can see my wonderful documentation down here. This also supports Markdown, so I can do some enumeration here, save that, and yeah, I can see my cool documentation down here. So you can all go here now. I will post that in the chat here. And you can see a read-only view of my collection. So now my collection doesn't contain any data, and it's quite useless. So what you can do is either use the query generator and select databus artifacts, or you can write your own custom Sparkle and associate that with your collection. So this is probably a quite easy way. If you know Sparkle to select files, you can go here, click the plus, and add a new custom query. And you can click that to navigate into that node and change the Sparkle query, maybe add some description so other people can still use that and know what you were thinking when you created your collection. This will select the strategy paper of the databus, which is also uploaded as a databus artifact. And I will leave it like this and commit my collection. And now I can see there's one file, and this is the data set that is selected in this collection. Now I'm not interested really in the strategy paper, but I want to add my own data set that I just uploaded. So I can go back to what was it? Jan and huge cities, my artifact, and I can add this to my huge cities collection. I don't want to specify anything here, and I will add this to my collection. Go back to the editor, and as you can see, I have this huge cities artifact now added to my collection. I will hit commit, and now my collection contains, okay, both. That doesn't sound right. Oh, it didn't save that one. Okay, still a beta. No, okay. So as it seems, hang on. Okay, I'm stuck with the strategy paper for now. Usually that shouldn't happen, and that will go to the bug tracker. Now I can use my collection and use this to, for example, aggregate a couple of things from the databus. You can also go here on the plus and use the search. So if I want the DBpedia ontology inside of my collection, I can add this here and have the DBpedia ontology here. This is multiple files, so if I only want RDF, I will go here and check RDF. And this way you can select files easily using facets and create your own collection of data. All right. I should have used this opportunity to get rid of this. Anyway, there's my collection now with 3 files, huge cities, the DBpedia ontology, and the strategy paper. Now it seems to be okay. Yeah, that basically concludes how to create a collection. And the next bit will be about using these collections in applications and services. Are there any questions?
Yeah, I think there are 2 questions in the Slack channel. Right. There is one on the caching mechanism used by the DBpedia databus. So the question is from Gregory, asking, does DBpedia databus have any type of cache for the actual data, not only the metadata? Or is it the data always loaded from the original store?
The data is loaded from the original store. So that is only a way to fetch download URLs that will point to other servers. So there's no data caching.
Yes. So basically the databus is kind of a proxy between the user and the publisher, the provider. And there is another question, which is a more general question from Roberto Shimizu, asking for an example illustration of what business problem it solves. So I guess the question is targeting the databus, if I'm not wrong, not the collections, because it was entered in the chat during the databus presentation. Yeah. So, Jan, do you want to give it a try?
I think one really important thing that the databus solves is the versioning of data. So that you have a way to manage logical data entities, improve this data set over time, and then have this accessible in the same spot. So you always know where to go to find certain data to a specific topic from a specific publisher, and it really streamlines this update process of data. And you want to expand on that, Milan?
Yeah. Also, another, let's say, an example of or benefit of the databus is actually presented during the next session, where you can bind together data and software. So basically, you can develop configurable applications and bind it to a particular data artifacts. And this is what Jan will show in the next session, where he will explain how you can develop applications using particular artifacts, data artifacts hosted on the databus, which enables you that you can always deploy an application with the latest version of the data set hosted on the databus, right? So,
all right.
yeah, I think you can, continue with the next session.
I think also one thing I haven't shown so far is that these collections are also used to do the for the latest DBpedia releases. So under the DBpedia user, and you can find the latest core collection if you haven't seen that already. And this collection will always contain the latest DBpedia release. Since we're using Sparkle here to query on metadata, we can write queries that always look for the latest version of some artifact that has been published. And once we do a new DBpedia release, which is now quite frequently, this collection will, well, obviously select other files, and is therefore a dynamic collection that will always point to the latest DBpedia releases. And you can see here all the files that were previously previously it was a similar thing to select these files. This is all now much better organized in the collections, and so the artifacts always stay the same. Maybe we add some artifacts or we remove some artifacts. If there's really valuable artifacts, so for example, I think down here there's a couple of artifacts that are not from the DBpedia publisher that have been integrated into the DBpedia release. So that happens as well, that artifacts from other publishers are added because they are really have a good quality and make a great addition to the latest DBpedia release. Yeah, okay, so that's also a couple of words to the latest core collection. You can also, you can explore around here on the page. There's also ways to edit a copy of specific collections, or even save a collection to JSON format and load from JSON formats and so on. Makes it really easy to share collections with others, or to extend on already existing collections. All right, let's go to the last session about Dockerized DBpedia applications. The applications used in the DBpedia stack can all be run using Docker Compose. And for those of you who don't know, Docker Compose it's a way to run Docker containers and to run multiple Docker containers in one system. And you start these containers simultaneously, and in the Docker Compose you provide a configuration for each container. And usually in our setup, we have one application container that coordinates the process of the startup process of the different containers. Then most of the time we use the download container, which is passed a collection URI and downloads data, maybe does some file conversion. And the application container might use also other containers that we haven't developed, some database, for example. The application container usually waits for the download container to do its job and then starts up other components that use the data. For example, if you want to host your own DBpedia chapter, you can, for example, clone or copy the latest core collection, hit some checkboxes for languages and select the data sets in a specific language. and then start up the Dockerized DBpedia. So you can you have the DBpedia HTML pages and the Sparkle endpoint and all that stuff hosted on your server. And this is a composite of the download container to pull the data from the databus over the collection, a Virtuoso container, and the loader container, which is the application container, which coordinates the process between the downloading and the loading to the Virtuoso. And I will show that here on my local machine. I have only a Docker Compose file here in my folder. This is also provided with in the Stack Tutorial Resources repository under Dockerized DBpedia. Let's have a brief look at the Docker Compose YAML. And here you can see the download container and its configuration. A bit bigger. The helper database or the databus database. It's a Virtuoso Open Source 7 container or image, and the loader. These have to be configured in a certain way. That's all documented in the GitHub repository. Most importantly, is we have this here, our collection URI that will be downloaded to a certain directory. And I will change this here to the collection that I just created. So looks about right. And once the Docker Compose has been configured correctly, all you have to do is run Docker Compose up. And now you can see that my containers all start. Here is my download container doing its job, pulling the huge cities turtle file, which is specified in this auto-generated query from my collection. I have the store starting up and the loader script waiting for the store and the download to finish and then terminating. So the store is still running, and I can now go to my localhost here and access the HTML pages, or go to the localhost Sparkle endpoint and run Sparkle queries. So this is basically a Virtuoso with the DBpedia plugin installed, already configured for the download Docker container and so on. So it's really easy to start that up. Most of the things are not in here. So if I go for again, Mac, for example, doesn't find anything because I only loaded the huge cities turtle file to the store. So it only has information about cities right now. All right, so that's the Dockerized DBpedia and how to start that up. There's the DBpedia lookup. It's even simpler. It only has an application container and also uses the same download container to pull data. And basically the same thing. Also provided in the Stack resources. I have an additional configuration file because for the lookup there's a lot to configure, and template XSL to format the results that I'm getting from the lookup search. You can also choose to return the format in JSON format. And let's have a look at the Compose as well. You can see download container and the lookup container. Again, I want to use my huge cities collection in here. Okay. And all you have to do is run Docker Compose up. Again, all these Docker Compose applications are fairly well documented in the respective GitHub repository. and there's a description on how to configure these applications. And everything works correctly. Yes, I can also on my local host run a lookup search and get information on large cities. Also, a cool thing about the lookup, it is really highly configurable right now, and you can really tailor the fields that are being indexed to the data that you are using. So, for example, here on the DBpedia databus, we're using the same lookup container to handle the search on the databus. So the databus data itself, the metadata itself, is again an artifact published as an artifact on the databus with a lot of databusception, and therefore we can use that artifact in a collection and run the databus search on DBpedia lookup. And last but not least, DBpedia Spotlight. Same concept. I'm not going to start this Docker Compose in this tutorial, but it's basically the same thing. You pull data and run your application using that data and by referencing a specific collection. As far as I know, the DBpedia Spotlight container doesn't use a download container, but queries data directly. But yeah, the process is still the same. Yeah, here's also some documentation on, but you can also find the right documentation in the GitHub repository. So yeah, exactly. And once the Spotlight runs, you can load different, select different languages of these trained Spotlight models that are also artifacts, obviously, on the databus, and select different languages, and then load these language-specific models into your Spotlight container, and have that also run in your infrastructure fairly easily. All right, I'm going to give it back to Milan. That concludes the last session. And yeah, feel free to ask questions, and thanks for your attention.
Yeah, thanks, Jan. There is a question from Mariano Rico in the chat. Mariano?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Jan and Milan. I have a question regarding the upload of the Sparkle endpoint, because I think you have shown how to upload data, because the Sparkle endpoint is prepared for adding more data dynamically while it's processing Sparkle queries. But what if you want to upload completely the information in the Sparkle endpoint? In my case, in the Spanish DBpedia, we delete the whole Sparkle endpoint with the previous data, and then we upload the new data. But the time between the delete and the full upload takes maybe 20 minutes. And during those 20 minutes, we have to refuse Sparkle queries because the endpoint is not prepared. So how can we manage these periods in which the Sparkle endpoint is not ready because it's uploading information?
So this is not specifically handled in the Docker container. So unloading and reloading data is not. It's basically just for starting up, as it was before, as you said, or you used it before. But potentially you could use run a second container. So and start it with a new version. There will then be conflicts with ports, obviously, but if you can reroute that, that might work.
Yes. So you propose to change the Apache, for example, the Apache system to point to different virtuoso versions, no, one with the old one, but this is heavy in terms of computational power, no, because we need at the same time two virtuosos running with the whole data set, no? So we have to duplicate the information. We have to manage two repositories at the same time, no? I expected something with the Docker, because I didn't knew about the Docker Composer, and I had many expectations on that.
Yeah, what you can do is with the Docker Composer or Docker to run both instances next to each other, and I don't know if you can probably change port configurations when a Docker container is already running. I'm not sure if you can do that actually, but if you can do that, you can solve it like that, or you can solve it with a rerouting of the port and have those two containers on at the same time. But yeah, as you said, it's quite heavy on the resources.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions?
Yeah, here for the question from Ricardo. So what we suggest is if you want a reference data for a paper, I mean, you can use a databus collection, and then only you have to make sure that you really select static data, and you select the collection yourself. Right? If you use a collection that someone else created, you can never be sure if he decides to change his collection. And if you select the dynamics is that collection like a latest version, then it will obviously also change over time. But yeah, other than that, you can use a collection identifier too, because it's also just a Spark query.
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions? I don't see any questions in the chat, so yeah, after the tutorial, if you have any question, we'll be happy to answer. So just put them in the chat, and yeah, we'll jump on it. Okay, so let me wrap up the tutorial. So what we covered in this tutorial was primarily the databus platform and its capabilities. Jan explained how to upload data and how to work with the databus collections. And the last session was on developing Dockerized DBpedia-driven applications, such as the lookup service, the spotlight service, which are very well used applications behind the DBpedia technology stack. I would like to invite anyone, any institution or organization to join the DBpedia Association. There are already quite some members as part of the DBpedia Association. So if you would like to contribute and support the association and what we do here, feel free to join. You can find more information on the link that is in the slide, wiki.dbpedia.org/membership. This is, as I said, the second DBpedia stack tutorial that we organize, and if there is interest, we plan to organize additional one in November or December. So yeah, if you are aware of anyone that would like to learn about DBpedia, feel free to share the link below, the wiki.dbpedia.org/events, and invite them to join. At the same time, I would like to say a few words about the upcoming events. There is the organizational DBpedia chapter plenary call that we plan to organize soon in the second half of September. And more information will be sent out soon. So if you are interested in joining this DBpedia chapter plenary call, please write us. Also, a very nice event is the hackathon that will be organized between September 21st and October 5th. So it will be a 2-week long event. More information you can find on the website, and please register if you're interested. And the last event for this year that we plan is the Knowledge Graphs in Action conference. The Knowledge Graph in Action DBpedia Link Geodata and Geoinformation Integration Conference, which will happen online. It's free to join and follow the sessions, and feel free to register and attend the conference. So thanks again for attending the tutorial. We are happy to organize additional one if there is interest. Here on this slide you can find the most useful links, and I suggest that you join us on the Slack. And if you have any question or concern around the DBpedia, feel free to paste your questions on the DBpedia forum, which is on the forum.dbpedia.org. So thanks again, and it was very nice to have you all at this tutorial. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Have a nice day.